The Stage Door Show, celebrating the independent artist. With your host, Dave Hondel.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Stage Door Show tonight. This is Dave Hondel. You're listening to us on iHeartRadio. I have a great show tonight, guys. Very special show. I'm joined by executive producer and two stars of the acclaimed independent film written and directed by Josh Hope called Alex October. So please welcome to the show, Lisa Freberg, Brad Hunt, and Tara Shayne. Welcome to all of you.
Thanks.
Hey, guys. Thank you.
So, I'm just going to briefly talk about the tagline here. The Alex October tagline is: a sad man and a bored girl from an unusual relationship after a bizarre online classified ad brings their chaotic lives together. And it really kind of revolves around one of the main characters that Brad plays, Alex, offers $500 to somebody in a classified ad to do what he can't do, to carry out his suicide, and which is answered by October, which is played by Tara Shayne. So, but I want to start with you, Lisa Freberg, who's actually the executive producer and one of the producers on the film. And I know that, during this, the making of this film, it had to have been during COVID, the pandemic, and which is challenging in itself. So as an executive producer, how was that, during that time frame to actually film during that experience, I guess?
Well, so Dave, we were really fortunate because we actually shot the film in November and December of 2019. So it was literally right before the shutdown. And what was funny about that is at the time we were kind of going back and forth. Should we wait? We were in the middle of doing a bunch of other projects. But we really believe that it was important to set the film in Chicago in the winter. That was so much part of the story. So we went for it, even though I was literally on like 4 other things for third-party clients, and it was nuts. So the shooting, fortunately, we worked past that. But then when we were in post-production, it was quite interesting because we had to work with our editors remotely. When we went in to do the final mix for the film, we could only have like 2 people in the room at a time. So that's a little interesting, sure. Trying to give your notes. But everybody was really so, I think like everyone who worked during the pandemic, we found ways to make it happen. And in some ways it was really sort of a blessing for us because I think we got Roger Neal as our composer. He did Mozart in the Jungle, and he's an award-winning composer. Sure. And frankly, I don't know if I would have gotten him. Yeah,
in any other circumstance. So maybe a blessing in disguise.
I think so. Maybe.
Well, I know that the film, at film festivals anyway, it premiered at the Dances with Films film festival. But I know there's another release, a worldwide release coming up. So why don't you talk about that, Lisa?
We are so grateful. We're picked up by Despop Entertainment, and they're our distributors, and they believe so strongly in the film. We're doing a theatrical release, a limited theatrical release, and it's day and date with on demand as well. And that's going to be on September 30th. And we're very excited. We're premiering the film in Chicago for all of our cast and crew. Again, because of the pandemic, we really haven't been able to premiere for the wonderful cast and crew from Chicago. So we're doing that on the 29th. And then we go from there. So September 30th is our, big day.
Well, I got to tell everybody that's listening, this film is amazing. I really, I had no expectations when I was going to do this interview, and I was sent the link, and I watched the film from beginning to end. Just sat there. I was actually watching it on my phone. I was sitting where I'm sitting now, and I was watching the entire film beginning to end. I was just mesmerized. You guys, just amazing. Acting was top notch. Directing, cinematography, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But I wanted to kind of ask you, Brad, because your character drew me in immediately. I've talked about this on several shows, but my family, I've had suicide in my family, and depression and so forth. And it just to put yourself in that place as a character who was contemplating suicide and had failed attempts and so forth. How did you put yourself in that acting space, I guess, to play that role? Because you did it beautifully.
Well, thank you. And I've been around some sad things too, like you.
Sure.
And but for me, like I have a son, and it's almost it's like a holy grail. I have no experiential wisdom about what it would be to bury your own child, and so I actually had to allow my imagination to put the what ifs of that, because I don't even think it'd be respectful unless you know what that's like to even go about portraying what that's like. That was in my mind, the biggest obstacle about doing this role, because to me, it's almost holy. It's almost sacred ground.
Sure.
When you deal with, with suicide, or, losing a kid. And for me, brother, the way Josh wrote it was so truthful that I was fortunate enough to early on realize if I just own the circumstance that he's put me in and accept it, I might be able to do it, because I realized no one knows what that's like until that happens.
Right.
And in terms of suicide, I think if we get enough laps around the sun, we've either unfortunately lost someone who's done that or know someone, so you if you live long enough, you've witnessed what that can do. But in terms, this is one of the only characters I've ever done where I actually could not say I have life experience that can prepare me for certain things. And for me, the whole thing, it was about not being able to accept the period at the end of the sentence, which is when I lost my boy. And so, it might be from someone else's perspective, I was using alcohol to medicate, or I'm an alcoholic and that's how my life became this way. And for me, just day by day, moment by moment, in the script, it was all about my existence almost stopped when I was not able to be a good enough father to keep my son alive.
Yeah.
If that that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does.
And the rest really, brother, was like just my cast, like Tara and the director, and like Yash and Teague, and the crew is sometimes when you go about doing something and then you look around and you see that people are accepting the way it's going, it kind of, it's almost like being on a football team. You feel like, okay, today we got this done, and please God, let's see if we can't continue moving forward to, so I was just more or less looking in the eyes of everybody around me, and if I felt like they accepted the way it was going, then I was actually just trusting them.
Yeah.
Because I tried not to watch what I was going through, because I felt, because of the situation of my character, I'm too far down the rabbit hole to even be, when you're so self-absorbed, you're not even looking at yourself anymore.
Yeah.
I just got lucky is what I did.
Well, turning over to you, Tara Shayne, being a producer and an actor on this film as well, and one of the stars, did that present challenges to you to work behind the scenes and then also, in front of the camera? So how was that process for you?
Totally. I love that. That's a topic because, as independent filmmakers, your audience, I'm sure, will know how hard it is to wear multiple hats and multiple roles on a project, but it's necessary. You kind of have to, to get things done. The good thing was I met Josh a really long time ago. So I had read the script before anyone. I was kind of the first person that had become a part of the film in the early stages. Josh and I met at film festivals years ago, and then we just kind of kept bumping into each other. My short had opened for his feature at a few different festivals, and so we just kind of kept running into each other. Right. And eventually we're like, we really want to work together. And he had sent me a batch of scripts that he was like, well, if any of these, strike your interest, let me know. And I like you, in script reading form, I sat down one of the nights and I started reading it, and I read it all the way through in one pass on my phone in my hotel room, actually in Sedona at a film festival.
Wow.
And it was the night before the closing ceremony that I was going to see him the next day, but he had sent them over. And so I just sat down and started reading it. And from beginning to end, I can't even describe the feeling that I felt the first time I read it. And what's funny is actually Brad just said something that I hadn't even was like in probably the crevices of my brain that I hadn't even put together. He talked so much about how the loss of his son in the script was a huge thing for him, that he had never, that was a big part of his performance and a place that he had to really search for to find, because it was something, he had never experienced and was really difficult. And my grandma, who's one of the people that I look up to the most and I think is like the most fascinating woman, she lost all 3 of her sons.
Wow.
Really young, actually. And so that just literally popped in my head as Brad was saying that I was like, that's one of the things that I immediately resonated with the film, was somebody who's had immense loss and is still powered through in their life and has found a way. But the struggle and how difficult that really is a big thing. But for me, I mean, I read it and immediately I responded to Alex's struggles, but I also immediately responded to October's struggles. And I unfortunately know a lot of people in my life who have committed suicide at a very young age. A lot of people that I grew up with, actually. So that's something that I'm very familiar with. And so that also like immediately struck a chord with me. And like Brad said, I love the way that Josh wrote it. It's so effortless, the way these people move. I mean, it reminded me of like a Before Sunset kind of vibe where, just like this story of 2 people, and it's more about the connection and the relationship, and you're just kind of enveloped in their emotional journey together,
Right.
rather than, a crazy car crash or, what, like,
Right.
I mean, there is stuff that happens in it, but that's not what it's about. It's really about relationships, and it's really about human nature and human connection and kindness. And as a producer, those were things, obviously, that when I read it, I immediately thought, how can we bring this to life, and how can we bring it to camera and not lose the awe that I felt while reading it, essentially? And how can I make my performance in particular, jump out and still be likable, because she's not a very likable girl, obviously. And when you see the film, I mean, off first hand, she's like, she's not a very
a lot of angst. Yeah. And, when I watched that though, to speak on what you just said, I have 2 children that are grown, and, so I've seen the whole progression throughout their lives, going through different processes and maybe selecting friends that, they shouldn't have or whatever, but it's all a process of learning. And I connected with your character immediately as well as I did with Brad's, but in a different way, because you see your own, my own kids, right? And my own daughter, and going through struggles of life, but it was all just a connection, just an innocent connection. Obviously, like any relationship, there's butting heads or whatever, but that's all part of it. That's why I thought the writing was beautiful as well. But did you know that you were going to play that part when you read it?
I mean, when I first read it, I read it as through the eyes of October. And that's when I wanted to play her.
Right.
I gravitate towards, I think, kind of these wounded characters.
Sure.
I can't tell you why, but those are the ones that I really kind of resonate with and I like to bring to life. But obviously, like I came in reading it and thinking, this is a character that I want to play. And if I can make it happen, then I will. And so when I got in touch with Lisa, and that all happened, I mean, this whole movie came together really by like strokes of faith. I mean, true luck of how everything came together. I Lisa, I think, got a hold of the script from like a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend who had read it. And that's how she ended up, meeting me, because she called me and said, are you Tara? I just got this script and I read it and I love it. And
Yeah.
I think you're the one I'm supposed to be talking to. And I was like, yeah. And that's kind of how we came together. And then Brad, I mean, I don't know if you want to tell the story, Brad, but Brad and I met literally, he came into my acting class one day, and I don't even think he was like meant to be there. He literally, like, a friend of his dragged him there one day because his regular class was not, in session at the time. And so he kind of popped in, and we ended up getting paired together and did a scene. And I literally, like, for the first time in years, was watching more than I was participating in the scene. I was just watching him going, oh my God. And so I immediately, like, when Brad showed interest in wanting to play Alex, it was a no-brainer. We introduced him to Josh, and we all went very Hollywood. We went and had dinner at the smokehouse.
There you go.
We talked shop, and and then it all kind of came together. And Josh was like, after I think he saw Brad and I together and how it all came, he was like, I can't imagine any other two people playing these people.
when we were waiting for our cars at the smokehouse, it was so solid because Josh, Brad from the beginning, he's like, I will only do this if the director, he says he has to have me play this role. Like, this is what you said, Brad. But Josh, when we were waiting for our cars, I remember Josh saying to me, he's like, this is so crazy. I can't see anybody else playing this part now. From this one moment, this one dinner, he's like, I wrote this part for Brad and I didn't even know Brad.
That's when it was meant to be. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, man.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Brad, let me just, as a man, talking about, like depression and suicide and so forth, I know with men, it's a lot more difficult to want to seek help, I guess, when somebody has a depression issue or contemplating suicide. And, as a man yourself, what would you say about that? I mean, what would you, because I mean, obviously, that doesn't mean that there's a message that has to go any further than the film, but, I think it's important when people watch this and it might connect with them. What are your thoughts as a man and going through depression, like, playing that character?
Well, first off, I think some of the choices that I made in the movie also had grace, because had October not answered the ad, I probably either would have drank myself to death or finally figured out a way to do it myself. I don't know how good a hitman you can get for $500.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, right. It's true.
Right. But I felt that was one of the best things about the way Josh wrote my character was I was so clearly trapped in a moment and in a rabbit hole with the drinking alone. Right. Based on how I was medicating myself. And you can say, am I an alcoholic and that created the problem? Or is it and to me, it's the chicken and the egg. It doesn't matter. What I was doing to get over this moment was only going to end bad if I don't get blasted out of the life pattern that I'm in, right, which is punching the clock, going to work, barely keeping my job. Every time anything hits, the answer's in the bottom of the bottle. I'm barely allowed to see my daughter. I mean, the door, everything's closing up around me, and I don't have the awareness to know that I'm the one that's closing all of this around me. Yeah. So I have, from my perspective, looking back on doing the part, I was totally involved in all of this shit happening to me without any awareness that no matter how painful the incident was when I lost my son, everything else was a choice I was making. Yeah. In terms of how to deal with the feelings that I refuse to deal with. And I think that's the number one trap for men, especially if you're brought up a certain way. Yeah. Where you keep your own counsel and you can cry at a funeral, but you never cry because you're hurt. And you're supposed to keep moving on, keep plugging on. And so when these things happen, like sadness, emotional depression, I think for a lot of guys, it's almost a sign of being somehow weak-minded, and I think a lot of it is self-perception.
Yeah.
I don't think it's happening from other men. I think it's the way men treat themselves regarding like mental health.
Yes.
Right. We have our own ideas about, I know so many farmers where I'm from in the middle 80s that hung themselves because they just did bad business on government loans, on combines, but they never put it together. They failed.
Right.
And I think it's kind of interesting that a man will take a thing personal that may or may not be within his control, but by not talking about it and by finding your own ways of dealing with it that aren't always healthy ways, because you're actually kind of avoiding,
right,
you have a tendency to isolate yourself and be surrounded by everybody. So it's that thing of like, everyone's here, but I'm still totally alone.
Right.
And I can put on the dog and pony. I can go make my deals. I can go and do this, get my shit. I can do the things, and nobody has a clue that tape is going.
Right. You're putting on an act, almost a facade, correct? Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Out of masculinity or whatever it is.
Yeah. And you're not even aware. I think you're not even aware that you're even doing it. It's not even like you're trying to put on a brave face. It's like you unwittingly
right.
start listening to your thoughts to the point that you think that you're your brain.
Yeah.
And your brain only wants attention.
Yeah.
And its fear of annihilation can kill you.
Exactly. You're absolutely well said. Well said, Brad. The other thing I want to turn to now is we talked about this earlier, but the cinematography in this movie was absolutely phenomenal. I'm an old filmmaker myself, but that was years ago. But when I see good cinematography, it's amazing to me. So I know that you talked about. I know they go by what, Yash and Teague.
Yash and Teague. Yeah.
So I want to talk to you, Brad and Tara, both. When you're acting out a scene and it goes from scene to scene to scene, and you're doing you have to get it shot because it's either you're losing your light or it's the perfect time to shoot. You're not really thinking how it's going to really end up on the final screen. Mm-hmm. So as actors, what that must be exhilarating to actually see, what you did, when they yell action and then cut, you go to the next thing, but to see it on the screen in its final form. I mean, what was that like? I mean, Tara, start with you.
I will just first say Yash is amazing. So I'm so glad that you appreciated and saw that as well. I worked with Yash on a film before. And that's kind of how we were able to get him on this film. Luckily, he was available, and we were able to get him from, I think it was India. He was at the time filming something, and we were able to bring him in to be a part of this. And I mean, we had been throwing around some DP, names and looking at a lot of different footage and looking at people's reels. And Yash was one person that I just knew had a vision, and I knew was going to understand the coloring and the concept, and I just knew he was going to get what Josh's vision was to be able to, put that on canvas, basically. So I was so glad that he was able to come, because you just know when he's behind the camera, you trust that whatever's happening is, like Brad said earlier, we're just trusting everyone around us.
Right.
And that's kind of all we can really do. We're so in the moment. And luckily, I had so much trust for Yash and for the actors that I was working with that. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to see it, because I didn't really go even as a producer, I didn't go behind the monitor really at all during filmmaking. I mean, maybe once or twice to check things. Right. But I really tried to stay focused on my performance, just because it's such a heavy topic, obviously, and it is a really heavy emotional film, and I really wanted to make sure I gave all my energy to October and doing her justice in the film. So I didn't really get to see anything. I think there was one moment I remember during the fireworks shot where I think Brad had stopped on set one day, and because it was his day off, and I think he came by to check check stuff out. And after we cut, he came up to me and he said, that looked incredible. And those little moments that you're like, I mean, I knew it, you know what I mean? And you feel it, but then when you hear it and and you feel it is exhilarating for sure, because everyone around you is buzzing and it feels right and it looks right. And I think it's hard, a topic like this. How do you bring it without making it, too heavy? And Josh's writing does have a little flair of a dark comedy, where how do you do that without it being offensive, And so
Sure.
all of it comes together, and the cinematography brings it all together, because really Josh and I, early on when we had talked about the film in general, Chicago, the city itself, is a character in the film and is such a huge part of the story. And the fact that Yash was able to capture the city truly as it is, and we were able to really get in there, and the sweeping landscape shots of the city line and the lake and all that stuff. Like, it really is a character, and it adds so much. So that, to see that all come together, and then especially with, the composition, that, oh my God, like the music is amazing. I mean, I'm so grateful and so happy for how everything came together, because it does. I mean, like, everyone did such an incredible job. And indie filmmaking's hard. I mean, anyone can tell you, your listeners who are, filmmakers themselves and independent filmmakers, it's hard. You're running and gunning, and you're constantly having to adjust. And like you said, you're losing daylight. We got to cut this scene. And Josh was having to rewrite scenes literally on the spot to make it work. And we're having to, we didn't get this location locked in time, so now we got to relocate and try this instead. And it's hard. And I think as an actor, I think Brad and I you just have to go in a place where you're just going with the flow and just staying focused and trusting everyone and trusting the process, and knowing that it's, it's all going to come out kind of how it's supposed to. And I think that it did, for sure.
Absolutely. And Brad, the scene that you, towards the beginning, when you're out by, the Chicago skyline in the background, that was, I mean, literally that scene right there just hooked me in. I mean, for the rest of the film, it was amazing. That, just like I said, the cinematography, I think, in a dark story like this, it's beautiful, if that makes sense. It's beautiful and dark at the same time. But
hey, brother, can I tell you one thing on that? How this stuff is so awesome.
Yeah.
We shot that before. And then we realized we shot it on a night where we didn't have the skyline, because it was a Sunday night. All the lights were out.
Oh, okay.
And that's the difference between just being a suit and being a creative producer.
Right.
Lisa insisted we go back and we reshoot, because without the Chicago skyline, it doesn't mean anything. And you just now literally displayed why it was so important, even though it was cold, to go back and do it all over again, because you can't fake being on Lake Michigan and looking at Chicago and that loneliness with those the whole world's over there.
Right.
And it's her money. And she goes, we'll go ahead and do it. We're going to do this. We're going to do another night, because this shot we have to have.
It's that important. Yeah. No,
it is.
Well done.
It's so true, man. Because if we don't start there, where do we go?
Yeah.
Because like Tara just said, and I remember us talking about it at the Smokehouse, is like, we're going to be straight as long as we remember the lead character is Chicago.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we in Chicago.
Right.
And it was like, that's why independent films are great, brother. Because you don't have enough money. You don't have so many committees. You can accidentally everybody get on the same page.
It was beautifully done.
You know what I mean?
Yash actually, I remember the call with him. He talked about one of the reasons why he really wanted, first of all, he loved the script. But then second of all, when he knew that we were shooting in Chicago in the wintertime, he was like totally freaking out about, oh my gosh, the Chicago sky in the dead of winter. I mean, he's just like geeking out on what it was going to look like. And he And then Brad, you can probably speak to, being on an independent film, we're all loaded into one car driving to location. So I'm like driving and I pick up the DP and the gaffer and then the actor.
Yeah.
But Josh and Teague driving like every single day, they're just having these beautiful conversations about the look and the symbolism of the color palette for the scene that they were shooting that day. And I mean, you could not have asked for people who were more passionate. Years ago, I had like the blessing when I did commercials, I was able to work with Gordon Willis Jr. And, his father, Gordon Willis, is the cinematographer of Godfather films and was really the person who, one of the first cinematographers who really told story with the way you paint the picture with light. And I had read about that and talked to Gordon about it years ago. And being with Teague and Yash and just the way they really dissected everything and thought about the color palette and how that was going to influence the storytelling was really incredible. I think that's the other thing, that if you have no money, it's a low budget film, it's an independent film, don't think that gives you up. I always say it doesn't give you permission to cut corners.
Right.
You can make your day, but if it looks like crap, who cares? You don't get to put like a postscript of like, we made our days, but our film looks like shit.
Exactly.
I was going to say one thing. When we first talked about what he was looking for in a DP and what he really wanted, one of the things that he said first off to me was, I need a DP who understands neon. And he was like, he goes and understands it in a very like specific way.
Right.
And that was one thing that I think when Yash first read this script, and he was in India, so he was like 16 hours ahead or whatever, and he messaged me, and it was like in the middle of the night, and he had messaged me on WhatsApp. And he was like, Tara, I just finished the script. And I hadn't even said anything to him about what Josh had said. I just was like, read the script, let me know what you think. I'm looking for a DP. And like one of the first things out of his mouth was, I want to use neon.
Yeah.
What does the director think about neon?
Wow.
I see neon lights, and I was like, oh, this is gonna... like,
everything just fell into place with this movie.
Yeah.
He's
amazing.
a taxi driver, I think he said.
That's amazing. Yeah. I love stories like that. And also I Lisa, I just want to get back to you on this topic and Tara as well. But, right now, I mean, Hollywood, we're seeing more women in higher roles, but I mean, I don't think we are where we need to be. I wanted your thoughts on that, because I know as a producer, and, Tara, you as a producer as well, where do you think we are headed? Are we heading in the right direction with that?
Well, I think historically women have played a pretty strong role in the producer positions, or anything in production, frankly. And I think it's, from management, line producing, creative producer. But so I feel like those are solid, and we're probably even skew a little bit more towards women in those positions. And frankly, it's because in general, we can multitask very well, but no offense to the men, but
no offense taken.
None taken.
But then when we look at like directing or editing, these are positions that I think there's still a long way to go for women in the business. And of course, in probably the last 5 or 6 years, we've seen a lot more female directors coming forward, which is really, really exciting. And I think just in general, opportunity opening up for women and different people of different, nationalities or cultures. It's just, there's just such a beautiful way for us all to have a different perspective on stories. But I would say, so I guess to answer your question, I think we've come a long way, and obviously there's still further to go. But I will also say that I think that for any story, the most important thing is who understands the story you're trying to tell, regardless of gender, regardless of, whatever. And one of the best compliments that we've had even in our casting was, we didn't have like a list of check boxes that we need to hit with diversity or, LGBTQ. So but we have a very beautiful mix of people in our story because that's the world we live in.
Right.
And we were so fortunate that our casting director brought in, again, a woman, Brittany Ward, fantastic casting director. She used her position to really influence our film by who did she bring into the room for us to consider in casting. And, she looked at it from a storytelling standpoint, as any good casting director will do. And I will say, talking about women in business, she's now directing her first film as a female director.
Fantastic.
So I think the more supportive we all are of each other, then it's just everybody. You have this on your website, Dave, and I appreciate it so much that I agree. All people have creativity, whether you're baking a cake or making a movie or, producing a song, whatever. Just tap into that creative and express yourself and have the joy. And I think Brittany is a great example of, she has a story she wants to tell, and somebody's giving her the opportunity to tell that story as a director. And that's important. Does that answer your question? It's kind of
it does. And absolutely. And Tara, if you have anything to add, because I want to hear from you on that as well.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely agree with everything that Lisa said. And I didn't have any like preconceived notions, I think, as far as who was going to play what or be in what role or whatever. For me, it was, like Lisa said, really bringing together the right people who understand the story and want to tell the story and be authentic with it and really, all come together in harmony, as they would say. I will say when Lisa, because I'd been pitching this around, Josh and I had been really like pounding the pavement, pitching it, to a bunch of different places. And when Lisa called and said that she had read it, and immediately she just resonated right with all of the things that I did and that I know that Josh was inspired by when he wrote it. Of course, like I love collaborating with women. I mean, I like collaborating with men too, but to know that like that was another woman who read it from how I saw it.
From your lens, right?
And can relate in that aspect. That was exciting. And I look up to Lisa. I mean, she's like become a mentor because she's got so much experience and she's a beast. I mean, this woman you're incredible. Like, she's incredible. And as a producer, it's awe. I'm in awe watching her all the time and what she does and how she does it. And she doesn't let anything hold her back, which I think anyone should do, regardless, like she said, of, race, gender, whatever. But I would say, for me, there's a filmmaker, her name's Britt Marling. She's an actor filmmaker. I don't know if you ever saw, she did a Netflix series called The OA. She came out with a movie called The East like a few years ago. And she is a writer, producer, actor, and truly was one of the first, I think, like women in those roles that inspired me to be like, wow, I can do that. Like,
right. Yeah.
I can act and I can produce and I can do this and that. And so she was watching her stuff and, how she was able to come up, and the people that she was bringing together was a huge inspiration for me for wanting to take on a behind the scenes role. Cause that was something I was never really interested in at first. Until I read this, I mean, I had done like dabbled in it a little bit, but this is my first feature really as in these roles. And as a producer, it was just kind of like, I want to tell this story and I want to be involved. And I just kind of took on that role myself and said, I'm going to figure out how to do this and learn to do it along the way. And luckily I was able to have Lisa come on board and kind of guide me through the rest. But yeah, I mean, we had, like she mentioned, Brittany, who our casting director, she brought in people that I don't even think we had in mind or would have originally thought of for certain roles. And she was able to come in and say, I know it was written like this, but why don't you see what this person does? And that's how we were able to bring so many different, people on board, was just by really digging in and finding who was the right for the role, regardless of anything behind it, basically. But I mean, as far as women go, I think Lisa's right, where like we need to support each other more.
Right.
I think than it's a very competitive, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, it's competitive for men or women, but
Right.
I just think as women, we can really do better supporting each other more and uplifting each other and helping each other.
Yeah.
So that for me, I think could be something that we could work on,
That's well said as well. And before we go, I asked this of all my guests, and if you've listened to my show, you know where we're going with this. But we'll start with Brad. I always ask everybody what you want your legacy to be when it's all said and done. What do you want people to think of when they think of Brad Hunt?
Never lied in the work, always telling the truth, and always treated everyone with the respect that they deserved.
That's great. And then Tara.
I think I would want my legacy to be that I was always my authentic self, and I always treated everyone with kindness and humility.
That's beautiful as well. And Lisa, how about you?
I think my legacy, it's funny, I heard your interviews with some other people. I was like, what am I going to answer to that question? I feel like my legacy is also the reason why our company came into existence. And it was because I found myself making a lot of content and working, I had great studio jobs and all of those things, but I didn't really care about the stories I was telling. And for me, I think my legacy would be that the stories that I chose to tell are stories that made a difference in people's lives. And that also I gave people opportunity to tell the stories they wanted that maybe other people wouldn't have given them the opportunity.
So I want to go on record. Josh Hope, without writing it, there'd be none of it.
Sure.
Josh and Teague were godsends. But on this producing thing, as Tara was talking about, she'd never produced, and that I'm just an actor. I just stay in my last lane.
Right.
I've never seen two people become such a force of nature as what Lisa brings to the party and Tara's ability to absorb it and then apply it. I feel as if these two human beings will probably produce a whole bunch more stuff. And I've been I only want to be an independent film actor. That's all I ever wanted to be.
Yeah.
And I can't count when I've ever seen such a team of kind of selflessness.
Right.
And between the two of them, it would be I ain't trying to get another job, but I'm telling you straight out, it was amazing to work for them. Just as a damn actor, I'm just telling you right at the gate.
Sure.
I just want to go on record before saying that. That like Tara be taking herself like, oh, I tried to produce. I just didn't know what the hell she did amazing.
Tara, we're going to get it for so much cheaper next time.
And we all know Lisa Freberg, like she is a force of nature, like,
Yeah.
But I just felt humbled to be working for them and with them. Honest to God.
Thank you, Brad. Hey, Dave, Dave, before we wrap, can I just say something that, hearing you with your story, I really, first of all, I wanted to tell you I was sorry about in your family that, your dad.
My father committed suicide when I was 7, but I think it kind of molded me to be the man I am today, as opposed to how I could have turned out. After that happened, my mom raised sensitive men, my brother and I, and to treat women with respect and to treat everybody we come, in contact with respect and with kindness. And I think that, again, that's the blessing in disguise that kind of came of that. But I appreciate that. Thank you for that thought.
And I want to tell you how much I appreciate that you're so open and honest. I personally, and that was one of the reasons we gravitated to telling this story, was because it's important that people talk, and that's how we take the stigma off of mental illness or whatever it is. So I just wanted to thank you for doing that. I think that's part of your legacy. That's what made me think, I'm like, your legacy is really opening up people to be honest.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you for that thought. I really appreciate all of you, for first of all, for being on my show and for, this beautiful piece of work that you all did. I think it's amazing. And I can't wait till the 30th of September.
Are you going to go and come back? Are you going to go see it then?
I would love to. I live in Miami, but if there's anything,
I thought you was in LA.
No, I've been in Miami last year and then New York City for the past 10 years prior to that. So, but yeah, anytime I can go see it in a theater, I definitely will do that for sure.
Thanks for watching it, man. And thanks for
thank you.
Of course. And thank you all too. And we'll post this obviously on all of our websites and everything that we have for social media. And, I wish you nothing but the, best success with the film. And, please keep in contact. You guys are all welcome on my show again. Talk about how the film went, how the premiere went. We can talk about all that too at some point.
Yeah, brother. Totally. Let us know.
Brad, Tara, and Lisa, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
All right, brother.
Thanks, Dave.
Okay.
Thank you.